Welcome, everybody, to the 8th in USINPAC's series of conference calls on the 2014 Indian elections culminating this Thursday. My name is John, and I'll be watching our Q&A portals during the call. With such a large audience, we hope you understand that we cannot let everyone ask questions, which is why our attendees are muted. Everyone has received instructions as to how to submit questions, and we thank those who have contributed to date. Those joining via WebEx will see a Q&A tab on the right side of the screen to submit questions to our panelists and experts. We'll be monitoring all question portals during the call. Now to start this special expert series conference call, I'd like to first introduce Mr. Sanjay Puri. Mr. Puri.
Thanks, John. Thank you, John. It's such a pleasure to be here. We've had now almost 9 of these calls, and they've been very, very insightful for me personally, and from the enormous feedback we've gotten from our listeners around the United States, Indian Americans, members on Capitol Hill. It's been very, very valuable. The insight provided by experts has been tremendous. They've been nonpartisan and really been exceptional. Thought leaders, think tank people, polling experts, and today we have 2 of the best and the brightest also. And the effort is to continue providing insights into what is, in my view, the most amazing exercise of democracy in the world. I personally have witnessed it. 65% of people going to vote compared to 55% in the United States. That really sends a message to democracies around the world as to what can happen. Over 800 million people and over 100 million people first-time voters. So it's amazing. Well, to start the thing off, I'll turn it over to Dr. Surabhi Garg, who is the VP of Operations, to introduce our first guest. Dr. Garg.
Thank you, Sanjay. Today, our first expert is Mr. Vivian Fernandes from India. Vivian is a senior journalist, and he has been in the field for around 30 years. Vivian has been with television and print media for a long time. As a journalist, Vivian, we have seen him and his views on Indian business and politics. Vivian has worked on economic policy making as reporter, chief of Delhi Bureau correspondence, and economic policy editor. Vivian has traveled abroad with prime ministers such as Narasimha Rao, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and Manmohan Singh. And he has lately written a book, Modi Leadership, Governance, and Performance. And with this brief introduction, I'll hand it over to our India Director of USINPAC, Mr. Ravinder Sachdev. Ravinder.
Thank you so much, Surabhi, and once again, welcome to Mr. Vivian Fernandes and our various guests and callers who are tuning in or sending us their questions. And may I just repeat, as John, our colleague, has also requested, that please keep your questions coming in via the chat because we can get and tap the minds of our speakers accordingly. Mr. Fernandes, we'll begin perhaps by, let's say, a 3 to 4 minute kind of an overview which you would like to give to our listeners and to our guests about how do you see the Indian elections going and the next government coming?
Yeah, I think these elections have been quite polarized. They have been also quite, they've charged up the electorate like no other election perhaps other than the one in 1977. Mr. Modi has been an energetic campaigner. These elections have been very presidential. Mr. Narendra Modi, the BJP's prime ministerial candidate, has been campaigning since officially since September 2013, but he has begun his campaign well before that. And we are going to see quite a churn, I think, this time around. The latest exit polls conducted so far after 8 phases of polling, to which I am privy, suggest that the BJP alliance will be in a position to form the next government. What I understand is that the BJP party will get has seen a huge increase in voting in Uttar Pradesh, in Gujarat, in Rajasthan, in Madhya Pradesh. In Tamil Nadu, it is the BJP's ally, Jayalalitha of the AIADMK, which is sweeping the elections. In Uttar Pradesh, the anti-BJP vote has been split. So before the polling began, the pollsters were giving the BJP alliance up to 197, but now they are saying that the BJP alliance will be able to form a government on its own. So I think much of what has happened in the intervening period can be credited to the BJP's Prime Ministerial candidate, Mr. Narendra Modi.
Very interesting. Thank you. In fact, that you've just kind of answered a question which was coming in and which we had in the previous calls also. The question was that since the election started, the predictions were something, but it's an extended period of electioneering and campaigning, and that could definitely, turn the results another way, as you're saying that from your predictions, or not predictions, what you're seeing exit polls, that BJP alliance would definitely be doing better than 197 seats.
Before the elections,
please.
Before the elections started, the seats that were given by the pollsters to the BJP alliance ranged between 134 and 187. We require 272 to form a simple majority, and now one of the TV channels whose exit poll was leaked out yesterday, which resulted in a 650-point rise in the Sensex, which is the Bombay Stock Market Sensitive Index. It says that the BJP alliance will be able to form the government. Now, these exit polls cannot be broadcast until half an hour past polling on the 12th of May, which is the last polling day. So we'll have to, hold our horses till then. But it seems pretty clear that the BJP alliance will be able to form the government. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, does it mean, because there's another question we just got on chat, which says that, over the last few weeks, we've suddenly seen the political discourse kind of becoming sharper and, becoming more pointed in a way. So has this polarization kind of helped the BJP, if that's what seems to be since the start of the elections?
I think so. I think the BJP has been operating on two tracks, which it normally does. This time, for example, the BJP's Prime Ministerial candidate Narendra Modi has been talking about development, but closer to the end of elections, he has brought in other emotive issues. For example, the issue of lower castes and backward castes, giving a spin to what Congress leader Priyanka Gandhi talked about, niche politics or niche rajniti, low politics. So he's given it a twist and he's brought in the caste angle. And there's always been this kind of play on dog whistle politics, because let's not forget that the RSS has been pressed with strength into this elections. I was in Varanasi about 15 days ago, and I was speaking to the previous BJP president. He was saying that there are about more than 1,000 booths in Varanasi, and each booth has been assigned a booth committee. Each committee has about 20 members, and these are RSS members, and each of them is supposed to contact about 50 persons. So they go house to house, visit them twice or thrice over, and try to win the candidates, try to win the voters over to the BJP. So on the one hand, the BJP is talking development, but on the other hand, they have been talking also about other emotive issues like caste and religion. For example, in Amethi, I think we saw the picture of Lord Ram in the background. The choice of Kashi itself, Varanasi or Banaras itself, is quite clear to those who can understand this kind of politics. So it has been a twin-track strategy on the part of the BJP, but the opposition also. For example, the Aam Aadmi Party in Varanasi has been doing pretty much the same thing which the BJP has been doing in terms of door-to-door campaigning. A large number of volunteers have gone to Varanasi, and I think in Varanasi the thing to look out for, Modi's victory is perhaps assured, but the thing to look out there for is the margin of victory. And I think Arvind Kejriwal of the Aam Aadmi Party is going to pose a formidable challenge to Mr. Modi.
Thank you. That's interesting. You used a term which I think we've recently seen a few mentions here and there, that is dog whistle politics. I think, of course, you've kind of explained it, but perhaps, for the benefit of our listeners, some of them may not be aware of this jargon which has come up in Indian polity. Could you just define it in a quick 10, 15 seconds, please?
Yeah, dog whistle is basically a whistle which is, beyond the audible range of human beings, but which is within the range of hearing of canines. So this is something which is done below the radar, and you have seen the BJP's election in charge of UP, that is Amit Shah, talking about the politics of revenge. You have also seen on the part of the Samajwadi Party, Azam Khan, talking about very much religious and political issues. But some of these have been very overt. In the case of Azam Khan, for example, he has been overtly talking about religious polarization. But sometimes the message is sent subtly, which may not get you into legal entanglement with the Election Commission, but will be quite audible or understandable to the people who form your constituency and who believe in, let's say, Hindutva politics or religious politics. And this is not just, I mean, the BJP has been a practitioner of this kind of politics, but the BJP has not been the only practitioner. We have seen other parties also do that. For example, the Samajwadi Party and others do it as well.
Thank you so much. Now, coming back to the question that you were addressing perhaps of Varanasi, in a bigger picture, what do you think would be the impact of Aam Aadmi Party? And if you could, and since you're privy to some perhaps exit polls, what are those showing? What would be the number that the Aam Aadmi Party may end up with in the parliament?
See, I do not have those micro details. I only got to know about the BJP because the fact that the BJP, or rather the perception that the BJP was going to form a government on its own with its allies was the reason for the stock market rising to a very high of 23,000 points yesterday. I do not know how much the Aam Aadmi Party is going to get. I do not think the Aam Aadmi Party is going to get very many seats in Parliament, and I don't think that is their strategy as well. That they are just positioning themselves for the next elections. This is just a morale booster for them, because let's not forget that they got into this race quite late, and they do not have a political network in place in most of the constituencies. So if Arvind Kejriwal comes second in Varanasi with a sizable number of votes, it will be counted as a confidence booster for the BJP. And if, for example, if they pose a serious challenge to Rahul Gandhi in Amethi, and I think Kumar Vishwas is doing that, I think that will give a boost to the Aam Aadmi Party's morale and prepare it for the coming elections.
While at it, then maybe if you could also, I mean, what would your estimate be? The Aam Aadmi Party is saying that there could be elections within a year down the line, but in case there's a stable government, probably that's kind of out of the window for the next 5 years. Do you lay any store by this prospect that there could be a situation wherein we see another polls in a year or two?
No, this is something which I cannot. Indian elections have become very complicated, particularly this elections is very difficult to predict them. So one is not sure because most of the time what is projected in the media may not be what the people actually perceive, how they actually vote. So we'll have to keep our fingers crossed. I'll be taking too much of a risk by making any kind of a guess. But at the moment, all we can say with some amount of confidence is that the BJP alliance is going to form the government. How stable that government will be, one doesn't know. But minority governments, for example, have lasted in this country for very long. Narasimha Rao's government in 1991 lasted for 5 years. Manmohan Singh's government itself had to negotiate the numbers very hard in the latest Lok Sabha as well. So I do not see an election, Lok Sabha election, 1 or 2 years down the line, unless of course the numbers that the BJP has managed to get are so low. I don't think that is the case at the moment. So I think we can safely rule out elections for the next 2 years at this moment.
No, thank you. We have a question coming in from Virginia. The question from this colleague of ours, a guest on the call, is that can Smriti Irani pose a serious challenge to Rahul Gandhi given the huge rally in Amethi by Modi, which we've been seeing on television and media broadcasts? Is there a serious challenge or a serious probability?
I do not know about Smriti Irani because I was there in Amethi, and what I can say is that for the first time, Rahul Gandhi is facing a challenge over there. Previous elections were a walkover for him. And what I read in the papers on polling day was that for the first time, Rahul Gandhi was there in a constituency on polling day. He went to some of the booths and he even told some of the voters, "Dekh lena bhaiya," which means take care of, please take care of me. So I think, he's been a little rattled. Whether Smriti Irani will be able to pose a challenge, or whether it is Kumar Vishwas, I do not know. In the case of Kumar Vishwas of the Aam Aadmi Party, he's been there for the past 4 months, and he has visited almost all the villages. But the people I spoke to also said that this is a prestige constituency. In fact, Amethi gets his identity because it is aligned with the Gandhi family. So the old-timers, I think, will vote for the Congress party. The youngsters might not. All I can say is that perhaps it's going to be a close victory for Rahul Gandhi. I don't see him losing, but I think his margin will be considerably eroded.
Thank you so much. We have a question coming in which I think you've already covered in our discussion so far, but the question I'll just repeat is asking that there was some discussion that there's a 160 club in the BJP, which is kind of hoping to say that, the BJP gets some seats, but the prime ministership doesn't go to Modi. Is there any possibility of that, sir?
If the numbers fall to that level, I'm sure that other leaders in the BJP would try and position themselves, saying that Modi is not an acceptable leader to many of the allies who have to depend on the minority votes. In fact, I think Madhu Krishwar, who has lately become a fan of a feminist, who has lately become a fan of Mr. Modi, she has been floating this idea, and she has accused a few BJP leaders of trying to thwart Mr. Modi's prime ministerial quest. I'm sure in every party there are people with ambition. After all, they have spent long years in that party, and I'm sure they would like to take a chance. And if the numbers fall to that level, 160 or below, it will be, of course, difficult for any leader to become acceptable. Mr. Modi stands a good chance because the whole party cadre, I think, is behind Narendra Modi. But when the numbers fall to a low level, then of course the allies will have a greater voice in government formation. And what your caller is saying might well be true, that some other person might become the prime minister. In fact, Rajnath Singh himself, despite all his protestations, might be nurturing secret prime ministerial ambitions. And let's not forget L.K. Advani.
Sure. Thank you. Another question which we have coming in, and in fact this came I think a couple of days ago. The question is that if or in case there is a Modi government, what do you think will be its key priorities in the first 100 days, or let's say the first 3 months or 6 months? What would be some immediate steps or initiatives that Modi administration in India may take or will take? Of course, they have to present the budget, the annual budget, right? But overall, where do you think their emphasis would lie?
I think the first thing that the government will have to do is restore confidence and show that it is a government that means business, which means Mr. Modi will have to choose some very competent ministers for key positions, especially finance, and also key infrastructure areas like railways, roads, not so much commerce and industry, of course, and of course invest in a strong prime minister's office. If you look at, in the case of Indira Gandhi, we had P.N. Haksar, who was her secretary. In the case of Vajpayee, we had Brajesh Mishra, who was a strong advisor to Vajpayee. So I would imagine that the composition of the cabinet, the competence of the ministers, as well as the composition of the prime minister's office would send out a message whether this government means business or not. If there is too much of jockeying for positions, if Modi is not able to decide or choose his, suppose he becomes the prime minister, if he is not able to choose his ministers, if there is so much of interference from, let's say, the RSS or others, then I think it's going to send a wrong signal. But for the first and most important thing is to give a message of confidence, to appoint competent ministers, and of course announce a budget which is investor friendly. One other thing, I think there's a lot, if I may interrupt, there's also a lot of fear among minorities. Mr. Modi has been trying to reassure the minorities that he is not going to mean harm to them. I think that is also very important, a clear message that he is going to take everybody along, because this country cannot afford to have social tension. If you have communal conflict, low intensity, even low intensity communal conflict, and the election of Mr. Modi might, trigger all kinds of grassroots people at the lower levels to indulge in this kind of things, social tension. But a clear message from the top that the government means well for everybody would also be very important.
So that's very interesting. And as you were giving us this observation or view of yours, we got a question come in on chat which asked that since you're talking that, his ability to appoint a key team of ministers or cabinet and the PM office would be a very important aspect. Would you care to make some predictions or place some pegs as to who could be perhaps the foreign minister or the NRI affairs? Because these are a few areas in which the diaspora is especially very interested.
In fact, I have not thought about this. Earlier on, we had Jaswant Singh, who was the foreign minister. He was a very competent foreign minister, but since he's walked out of the BJP and he's contesting on his own, the BJP might have to look around. I would imagine that in the case of finance minister, for example, Arun Jaitley might be a strong contender. In the case of foreign affairs, it could be perhaps Yashwant Sinha. I don't think the BJP is starved for talent, but at the moment I cannot guess who the foreign minister could be. I have not given it much thought. But I would imagine, let's say, since Yashwant Sinha has not contested as an MP, it will be difficult for him to become. I do not know. I cannot give a very certain answer.
No, sure. Thank you so much. We much appreciate, your throwing the light on whatever your perspective is. Another question which is there is in terms of Indian foreign policy, and especially with regard to US-India relations. What is your view? How would a Modi government shape or take forward its relations with the United States?
I think the relations with the United States are very important. It was, after all, the NDA government and Jaswant Singh himself, with the next steps in strategic partnership, who stepped up the relations with the United States. This was taken forward during Manmohan Singh's regime. We had a very good prime minister in the U.S. Of course, the Americans themselves may not have liked him. President Bush, who was a great friend of India. And between Manmohan Singh and President George W. Bush, we had a great partnership that meant well for bilateral relations. Unfortunately, that has taken a back seat during President Obama's time. I think the most important thing for Narendra Modi would be to forget the bitterness of the fact that he was denied a visa by the United States and to repair the relationship and take it to the next level. I think he has got a lot of friends in the U.S., the overseas friends of the BJP, who he can tap for this purpose, the NRIs over there. And I don't think Narendra Modi will allow the episode of the visa denial to stand in the way. I think more than the U.S., he'll also have to send a clear message to our neighbors, particularly Bangladesh, where we had a very friendly government in Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who has not been rewarded because of Mamata Banerjee, whether on the issue of the Tista waters or on the exchange of border enclaves. Number one, so we have got to push forward our relationship with Bangladesh because we have a friendly government over there. And of course, BJP government will be able to do much more with Pakistan than the Congress government could, because whatever the Congress government did, there would always a perception that it was, it would be a sellout. but the BJP is a very strong, it's like President Nixon doing the deal with China. So I think the BJP is in a position, especially if Narendra Modi becomes the Prime Minister, to repair relations with Pakistan. The question is whether the other side is willing, and how the government in Pakistan deals with its own radicals. Because if we have a repeat of the Bombay terror attacks, I think things will be very complicated. Because this government will be, will be required to act very tough, because that's the perception it has. So I think these are very important, and of course the relations with China, and Narendra Modi has been quite a regular visitor to China, and he has a great admiration for that country. So I think on foreign policy, these are the key issues: Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, and of course the United States.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Fernandes. And of course, I think we should have a separate discussion with you on India-China relations, because you've been, I think, doing a lot of study and writing on India's relations with China. Now, once again, I thank you so much for giving us your time, and I'll pass on the, so to say, the mic to my colleague, Dr. Surbhi Garg in Washington, to introduce our next eminent speaker. Surbhi, over to you, please.
Thanks, Rabinder. Our second expert on this call is Professor Sumit Ganguly. He's at Indiana University. He is a professor of political science and holds the Rabindranath Chair in Indian Cultures and Civilizations. He is also the director at Center on American and Global Security at Indiana University in Bloomington. He is viewed as a specialist on the contemporary politics in South Asia. He is the author, co-author, editor, and co-editor of around 20 books on South Asia. Professor Ganguly is currently working on 3 new books: Deadly Impasse, India-Pakistan Relations at the Dawn of a New Century, India Ascendant, and the Oxford Short Introduction to Indian Foreign Policy. He has very vast experience of interaction in the field of India and US relationships. Let's hear Professor Ganguly's views on Indian elections this year. Rabinder, I hand it over to you. You are the moderator. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Surbhi. Dr. Ganguly, your opening comments, thoughts on the Indian elections and developments, please.
Hello, Professor Ganguly is actually outside of the office. Yes, he needed to step out. He's going to be back momentarily.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Would we have Mr. Vivian Fernandes still with us?
Yes. Yeah.
Hello, Vivian. Are you there, sir, please?
Yeah.
Hi. So then maybe as we were discussing, hello?
Yes.
Is that Vivian, please?
Yes, I am Vivian here.
Yeah, hi. Okay. So Vivian, if you could, I believe our other speaker has just stepped out of the room, will be with us in a couple of minutes. In the meanwhile, if you could please help us and throw some more light on India-China relations in case we have a Modi government in India.
I think the border issue, I mean, the border problem will be something that is quite tricky to be solved, but I think one of the reasons why India has what you call has not been, I think one of the problems is that the economic slowdown in India has had an impact on our foreign policy. And I think if Mr. Modi is able to, if he becomes Prime Minister, is able to revive the economy, then we'll be able to hold our voice in the international arena. And this is true of the United States as well as with China. It's because of India's economic slowdown, I think that much of the problem between India and USA have crept up. Similarly with China, Mr. Modi has been to China, I think, twice already. On one level, we have to improve economic relations. The trade relations between India and China are currently skewed against India. We are importing more than we export to China. That will have to be addressed, and that will have to improve our own manufacturing, because currently we export more of raw materials to China. Secondly, we have to improve our people-to-people relations. And I think this is a great failing in our country, because we have not built a domestic constituency that is interested in peace in China. Mr. Modi was saying that he is going to have a Mandarin school teaching Mandarin in Gujarat, and I think some schools in Delhi have taken the lead. They have imported teachers from China. For a long time, India was not allowing the import of Mandarin teachers from China to India. That has been corrected now. In Delhi, that has been allowed, and I think we must place much more emphasis on this issue, on Indians learning Mandarin so that we can in turn understand the Chinese people better. Currently there is, even though Indians go to China, they go as tourists, but there are very few Chinese who come to India because they find that our infrastructure is not very good. They also can't speak the English language. I think this is one area where I would say that the next government must place very strong emphasis on. Secondly, our infrastructure. China has the money. It has got a lot of money to invest. India is a capital deficient country. If we can get Chinese people to invest in our roads and in our railways, that would be very good, because that would be one way in which we can cement our relationships. If there's one area that has been unreformed in India, it is the railways. China has gone big bang on railways. They have set up high-speed railways in their country. India is deficient. So I think India will profit a lot from getting Chinese technology to our country and also Chinese contractors to build our railway lines. And Narendra Modi has said that if he becomes Prime Minister, the railways are also going to be his priority, like the highways were a priority for Prime Minister Vajpayee.
No, I mean, very true, and it's, very interesting listening to you, and I think will be of high interest to several of our callers and guests when you mentioned the people-to-people relations and people-to-people relations, essentially, which could help India-China relations. And a living example and a vibrant example of that, or thriving one, is, I think, the US-India relations, wherein it's the people-to-people relations which have lent an even keel and a forward momentum to the relations always. I'll come back to this question on China, but in the meanwhile, there's a question coming in from Paresh. He is asking that a new social progress index for 2014, recently released maybe, ranks India 102 or 102 out of 132 countries. Will the BJP be able to improve this number? I think that's what essentially he's saying. Should we expect that a BJP, government will lead to better results the next time this index comes out?
I think all governments in our country are now focused on, one is, if you focus on improving the economic growth rate, that itself will be poverty reducing. In the case of Gujarat, what I find is that not only has there been a high rate of growth over the past decade in Gujarat, but more importantly, there has been a high rate of agricultural growth. In the past decade, between 2000, 2001 and 2011-12, while Gujarat as a whole, its GDP grew by about 9%, Gujarat's agricultural growth was 8%. And as we all know, that growth in agriculture is much more poverty reducing than growth in other sectors of the economy. So if the BJP government can, for example, improve the rural infrastructure, a lot of work has already happened in this area under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. If the BJP can take forward that momentum, if we can revive our manufacturing, if we can revive our economic growth, I think that itself will be, in a way, poverty reducing. And when people have more incomes, they'll also be able to spend more on education and on healthcare. And I think the BJP is quite, all governments in our country, I think there is a certain minimum consensus, and that education and healthcare must improve. Of course, the emphasis differs. In the case of the UPA government, it was more, the emphasis was more on entitlement. In the case of Narendra Modi, he believes that people should be able to help themselves. So in this sense, he's more of a Republican, so it's not a Republican in other aspects. For example, in his social attitudes or political beliefs, he's not a Republican in that sense. But he believes that people should be job creators, not job seekers. He believes that he believes in enterprise. In Gujarat itself, he has done a lot to improve education and the other social indicators as well, though the results are not so obvious.
That's very interesting, Vivian. You're giving a fantastic overview, I think. Another question which we have, which has just now come into me, It says that why did all prominent experts, or let's say many prominent experts, and people like Nobel laureate Amartya Sen speak against, or why do they speak against Modi as a prime minister? Would you care to take a guess at it or a thought on it?
In my book on Modi, I think there's a big ideological debate going on in this country. One is between the importance that the country should give to the private sector vis-a-vis the state sector. I think the leftists, though they have lost electorally, they still command a lot of mind space in India, and that is why, having failed, now that the state sector does not have the kind of influence it had before 1991, they want to make the terrain tough for the private sector, and that is why they always say, that wherever the private sector is involved, it is pro-big business, it is anti-poor, it is anti-small and medium enterprises, and so on and so forth. I do not agree with them. I believe that the private sector should be given importance in our country, that enterprise is very important, but where many people find Modi troubling is in his attitude towards minorities. And we can talk about all this concept about appeasement of none and development for all, but if you go to Gujarat, you find that it's quite a polarized society. I have been to some of the places where the riot victims are camped, and I find that they do not get basic amenities. And if you look at the conviction rate of criminals involved in the 2002 riots, it's quite pathetic. In fact, one calculation shows that for cases tried by the Gujarat government itself, the conviction rate was 5%, whereas in those cases where the Supreme Court was involved and where the cases were taken out of Gujarat to be tried in, say, Maharashtra, the conviction rate was 39%. So this is one of the reasons why many of the intellectuals find Modi deeply troubling. And I think it's also the reason why Modi himself has realized over the past 12 years that he should have an image makeover, and that is why he is harping on the theme of development. So there are other states, for example, Haryana, Tamil Nadu, and Maharashtra, that have done almost as well as Gujarat in terms of GDP growth in the past 12 years. But it is only Modi who is speaking about development. And there's a very conscious reason for that, because he wants to have an image makeover. I think Gujarat is a different kind of society, where society has been polarized even before Modi stepped in. The rest of India is not like Gujarat, and I think Modi realizes it, which is why he has been saying that he is not in favor of a uniform civil code. He will not trust it on the people of this country, and that he will take everybody along. I think leaders learn, live and learn, and I think that is what we should expect, or we should hope of Narendra Modi as well. But so far the evidence has not been there, and that is why you find all the intellectuals raising their or voicing their doubts.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fernandes. I will just check to see if we have our second speaker also on the line with us, Dr. Sumit Ganguly. Are you with us, sir, please?
Yes, I am, and I've been intently listening to the very thoughtful comments from your previous speaker.
No, thank you so much, sir, for joining. I believe there was some little communication drop in between. May I invite you to
My apologies for that.
Your opening remarks, your comments on how do you see the Indian elections going, and maybe US-India relations even, especially because that could be one focus area of your interest also, sir.
Yes, I'll try and address both issues as clearly as I can and as succinctly as I can. First, in considerable measure, I agree with the previous speaker in terms of his assessment of Modi. I do believe that from everything that I read and from my travels in India, though I have not been to Gujarat lately, but based upon everything that I have read, Gujarat today is a highly polarized state, and one hopes that kind of ethnic and religious polarization will not come to characterize all of India should Modi win the election, because that would bode ill for the country's social fabric and would really further tear the country's social fabric in a way that I think would be quite detrimental. But Modi since he is obviously a very ambitious man, probably will not stoke communal hatred for the simple reason that if he wishes to become prime minister a second time, it would be exceedingly difficult for him to do so, and also growth would stagger if communal violence comes to stalk the land. So I don't think he will actively work to further the communal divide that exists in India, though I cannot imagine him making a conscious effort to reach out to minorities given his principal constituencies. In terms of reviving Indo-US relations, the most important thing he can do is to restore investor confidence in the country, which the UPA government in its second incarnation did so much to damage. Specifically, for example, the UPA government's decision to impose a retroactive tax on foreign corporations, which did untold damage to the prospects of investment in the country. So he will have to do much to once again revive interest in India and also to ensure that infrastructure is properly addressed. He will also have to work towards making clear that policies will not change, will not shift on a dime. He will have to reassure investors that the country is indeed business friendly. And at the same time, he will have to make sure that he does not completely ignore parts of the country that are genuinely poverty-stricken and that social policies are not completely shredded. While the UPA government instituted a series of social policies, it is not entirely clear that they reached the intended targets. So the task before Modi will be to ensure that the baby is not thrown out with the bathwater. That on the one hand, well-meaning social policies are not enough, but simply shrinking the social safety net is also not a viable option. Let me stop over here and take questions, comments, criticisms, whatever might come.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. I think the first question which is coming up in our chat discussion is that if, let's say, on US-India relations, like you mentioned, there are some steps which a Modi government in India must take in terms of reviving investor confidence, no flip-flop on policies, etc. Simultaneously, what are or what could be some steps which the US administration could take to, rejuvenate or bring some fresh air into this relationship?
That's a fair question. One of the first things it could do is appoint an ambassador because very soon Nancy Powell will have left New Delhi. And to appoint an ambassador who enjoys the confidence of the president and an ambassador of sufficient stature so that India is reassured that it is not being ignored or being downgraded to a lower priority. The administration, quite understandably, has been preoccupied with the Ukraine, with adverse developments in the South China Sea, and with the collapse of the peace talks in the Middle East. But that's no reason not to pay adequate attention to India. Most of the attention that has been paid to India in the recent past has been of a negative order, and very little positive has come out in the recent past, especially after the attempt to engage India on the pivot, and to which India responded in a rather lukewarm and hesitant fashion. So the first order of business is to appoint a new ambassador and not to dwell upon, secondly, I would argue, some of the things that have plagued the relationship. For example, the threat to put India on the USTR's radar on Super 301 because of differences on issues having to do with intellectual property, pharmaceuticals, and the like.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think a very well-rounded, perspective there. And a couple of questions which are coming in. I think I can probably club them both together. They're asking that how can the diaspora, especially the diaspora in the United States, contribute to change in India once the new government is formed? That's one. And secondly, the question is that what can the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs, the so-called NRI ministry in India, be doing more rather than just one annual event, which is the annual Parvasi Bharatiya Divas, to engage the Indian diaspora?
Let me address the second question.
Yes, sir.
Right. No, the questions were eminently clear. Let me address the second question first. To the extent possible, the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs could work perhaps with the Ministry of External Affairs to improve a long-standing complaint of not just the diaspora, but Americans seeking to visit India. Trying to get a visa to India is a nightmarish process for the most part, especially when it comes to research visas. As an eminent American political scientist, Myron Weiner, who's no longer with us, once said that India is a democratic state which behaves like a totalitarian country. And that statement, while seemingly harsh, was not exactly off the mark. Any number of my students, if I may be so self-referential, have had problems obtaining visas for perfectly innocuous purposes. This does not enhance India's international image, and it certainly does not improve the cause of India in this country. It's easier these days to get a visa to China, a genuinely totalitarian state, than to India. These hurdles should be swiftly removed and adequate investments made so that the visa granting process is not a long drawn out effort, nor is it a protracted process. Also for that matter, much greater responsiveness should be worked on in Indian consulates and in the Indian embassy in Washington, D.C. The entire process is not transparent and not responsive, even after handing over the visa process to outsourcing companies. It's been highly uneven and often problematic. So that's the first thing that could be done, which would greatly enhance India's image and greatly improve access to India, not just by non-resident Indians, but by any number of Americans who are seriously interested in India and in studying in India and traveling to India. In terms of the diaspora, obviously, the diaspora, which has a substantial disposable income, should be encouraged to invest in India, should speak up on behalf of India when there are contentious issues. And in fact, in this area, the diaspora has done a fairly good job. When there are bills in Congress that affect India, the diaspora should once again mobilize on India's behalf, to speak up on India's behalf, but at the same time should not be wholly uncritical of India. If they are American citizens, they should remember where their loyalties lie. And on occasion when India is deserving of criticism, they should not be shy of speaking up, because otherwise they will be justifiably accused of having dual loyalties.
Very interesting. I think regarding the visa issues, the pain, I think a lot of us have seen it or heard about it, and it's absolutely out there, and it really beats common sense why this whole process cannot be or is not simplified and a smooth process. One quick question that the UN General Assembly is scheduled for sometime in September as usual. Now, normally the Indian Prime Minister could be visiting. Do you see a possibility of an Obama, Indian PM, / Modi meeting happening on the sidelines or in Washington, D.C.?
I think it would be entirely desirable for Mr. Modi to attend the UNGA, to make some gesture to the international community that, despite his past troubles with minorities, that he is genuinely interested in recognizing that India is an ethnically and religiously heterogeneous society and that Indian secularism remains robust and secure under his watch. Some reference, some nod towards reconciliation, I think would go a very long way and blunt many of the criticisms that have been routinely leveled against him. And obviously, it would be desirable if this summer, once the government is in place, that the Ministry of External Affairs reach out to the Obama administration and find a way to arrange a meeting with President Obama and Mr. Modi on the sidelines of the UNGA. And here, the United States could also demonstrate that it has not completely lost interest in India and has written off India. I think the symbolic significance of an Obama and Modi meeting on the sides of the UNGA could go a long ways in terms of assuaging this perception that India has simply fallen off the radar screen of this administration as it is preoccupied with other international crises and international issues and, of course, its domestic agenda.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ganguly. I think we have so many more questions which are rolling in, both for yourself and for Mr. Vivian Fernandes also. But I'll take this point in the conference to invite and hand over the conference to my colleague and the chairman of US-India Political Action Committee, Mr. Sanjay Puri, for a couple of questions between both our panelists and maybe a wrap-up and a thank you note. So on to you, Sanjay, please.
Great. Thanks, Ravinder. Thanks, Surabhi. And obviously, fantastic input, as Dr. Ganguly pointed from Vivian, and obviously from Dr. Ganguly, who we know very well from the United States perspective. I'll start with you, Dr. Ganguly. You touched a lot of threads which are, pain points for a lot of Indian Americans. So the question, obviously, of visas and all those other issues, has been raised many, many times. They've done outsourcing. Is there something specific besides, bringing it up to them that can be done? They have incredible India campaigns that keep running in terms of touting tourism. But when they start the process of Incredible India at the consulate, it starts going into, is it Credible India? So do you have any specific suggestions for them?
Yes, very specific suggestions would be to add more consular personnel to handle the visa requests. And let me be really brutally candid about this. It is horrifying when I personally call a consulate in the United States and it goes directly to voicemail every time. And I'm not making this up. This is a personal experience that has happened on repeated occasions. When someone is supposed to be at his or her desk, you can never get through. I fortunately know substantial numbers of people in the Indian Foreign Service, so I can circumvent this process. But one should not have to rely upon personal contacts for a routine matter. American citizens abroad are not treated as if they are being given a favor by American consulates or embassies. Because as an American citizen, when I've been in distress, American personnel, consular personnel, have responded with alacrity to me when abroad and have provided me the requisite assistance, because they know perfectly well that if they don't, I can write to my local congressman and lodge a really serious complaint, and then there will be hell to pay for the consular officer who proved to be unresponsive. A similar arrangement simply doesn't exist in Indian consulates and in the Indian embassy. It just so happens that my personal contacts override the routine processes. But the routine processes are what most Americans and Indians abroad are subjected to. And this is simply unconscionable for a country that aspires to be a great power. If it cannot respond adequately, it is losing goodwill every day, even amongst India's well-wishers. I cannot make this point more strenuously.
I feel your passion, Dr. Ganguly. Just to switch in the last question to you for taking the time. There is a perception in India, I visit India quite a bit, talk to the leaders of all parties, that President Obama really doesn't care about this relationship. So let me ask you a very direct question. Do you think President Obama cares about the U.S.-India relationship? What is your view?
I have a feeling that he might have become a bit disillusioned with the Indo-U.S. relationship. And I think this is a very serious question, and it merits a deeper answer. And let me try and give you my analysis of the situation. I think in considerable measure there was a mismatch of expectations when U.S. and India signed the civilian nuclear agreement in 2008. I think there's an inadequate appreciation in India on the amount of political capital that both the Bush administration and subsequently the Obama administration had to expend to get that through. And consequently, there was an expectation that India, in turn, would make certain gestures, would make certain efforts to accommodate the United States on matters ranging from trade, investment, and particularly access to the Indian nuclear market. None of this really came about. Now, it may entirely be the case that the Indians did not see the deal in a similar light. But because there was this perception in the United States, there was a deep sense of disappointment and gloom that came over the administration, and with other pressing matters that the administration was confronted with, the administration simply chose to move on to other issues. And then, to be quite honest, the extreme sentiments that were expressed over the Khobragade episode did little to improve Indo-U.S. relations. I think the Khobragade episode was unfortunate from the American standpoint, but India's reaction was simply over the top. Any number of Indians are grossly inconvenienced in the Middle East. They just don't happen to be of a certain social class. Indians are subjected to harassment, to beating, to injustice in the Middle East. Where is the Indian Ministry of External Affairs taking this up with any number of squalid regimes in the Middle East? They don't say a word. Why? Because remittances are at stake, because money is involved, and these Indians happen to be of the wrong social class. They are not like us. They don't speak with the proper accent. They are poor Indians who are toiling in the desert sun. But when the Khobragade episode took place, because she happened to be of a certain social status and a diplomat, then everybody went overboard in India about how awfully she was treated. And that, I think, had a profound effect on the State Department. And they said, fine, if you are going to remove security barriers from the American embassy, we can also play hardball. So I'm not entirely surprised by the Obama administration's reaction to India. So one has to put this in a broader context, even if it means talking about some rather unpleasant realities.
Well, that's great insight, Dr. Ganguly, and we really appreciate your comments and your thoughts. I have one last question because we are running tight on time for Vivian, and I'll
Sure.
Try to wrap it up. Vivian, I presume you're still there? Hello, Vivian?
Hi, Vivian. I think maybe we lost him.
Okay, well then I'll just ask for a quick wrap up from Dr. Ganguly. Dr. Ganguly, you touched on something that Vivian had brought up, you know, the issue of social justice and things. Is there, just in a very short way, is there something that if Mr. Modi gets elected as that poll that sets up points, is there something he can do symbolically within the first 100 days to put some level of confidence within, let's say, the minority community that, you know, just some kind of confidence building measure? Is there something he could do symbolic?
Well, for one thing, you know, he could appoint some prominent Muslims to important positions. Suppose a governorship of a particular state is becoming available. He could turn to, you know, key members in the Muslim community and perhaps appoint a governor. Critical appointments in the bureaucracy could be, prominent Muslims could be placed in certain positions within the bureaucracy. He could make some statement about the tragedy of 2002, a public statement in Parliament, some expression of regret, which he has scrupulously avoided doing. And in fact, the few statements he has made have actually worsened matters. So there are easy symbolic gestures that he can resort to, which might instill some small degree of confidence in the minority community.
Well, that's those are very, very good points. And Dr. Ganguly, we really thank you for being here. And Vivian obviously is not here, but we thank him. Great discussion. We could go on for another 2 hours because I have like 50 questions for Dr. Ganguly, but we'll have to wrap this up. Thanks to Survi Garg, Rabinder, thanks to John Zahides, to Via Banerjee, and all our hardworking volunteers for putting this together. I hope our listeners found this very, very valuable. I'll turn it over to John now to finish this wonderful call.
Thank you, Sanjay. We hope you join us next weekend for a final look at the Indian election. We hope also that you join us because we're going to have an all-star lineup of panelists. You'll receive dial-in instructions automatically if you've signed up previously. USINPAC looks forward to continuing this conversation with all of our members and listeners as we look towards U.S.-India relations and the road ahead. Please watch our USINPAC homepage at usimpac.com and through our social media portals for more updates soon. Thank you again for attending today.